Are you a success addict? If you are, however successful you are, if that's your thing that makes you feel good, it's never going to end well because you always need more. Your baseline goes up every time you achieve a certain level of success. And then, if you are a success addict, you feel like a loser when you meet someone more successful than you. I'm going to sort that out on today's podcast.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation.
Yes, hello again. Welcome to Zestology. Today's podcast interviewee is Arthur C. Brooks. I read his book a few months ago and absolutely loved it. In fact, when I was reading it, I mentioned it on the podcast a few times. And we approached him and asked him for an interview. And we recorded this interview recently. I'm very pleased we did because he's quite a big deal. In fact, he's just written a new book, as you will hear, with Oprah Winfrey. So that's what a big deal he is. And Arthur's book is From Strength to Strength, and it's all about redefining your life when you move into the second half of your life and the second period of your life. It resonated with me so much, and as someone who is a success addict, as I said at the start of the podcast, if that is you and you define yourself a little bit by your success, it's all right. I'm not going to judge you. I have been there for a long time in my life, and even now I have to battle it a little bit, as you will hear. But your baseline goes up. So every time you reach a success, you then want more to feel good about yourself. And then when you meet other people who are more successful than you, you feel like a bit of a loser. Arthur has loads of tools for how to get over this. As you mature and you ease into your body and grow into yourself a little bit. He talks about reverse bucket lists. He talks about how satisfaction isn't bigger things, but chasing smaller things. He focuses on facing death head on. You will hear about this. It's so fascinating. And the importance of community and having at least 2 good friends, which will give you higher levels of life satisfaction and self-esteem and lower depression as well. And then he talks a lot, and we talked about this in the podcast, about making your weaknesses your strengths, even if those weaknesses involve grief and tragedy and how they might be the making of you. Honestly, Arthur's work is so good. I absolutely highly recommend the book. And I think I've recommended it to all my friends. I don't know how many of them have actually taken me up on that. But if you are a success addict, you're going to love this podcast. Here is Arthur C. Brooks on Zestology. Arthur, we're on. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Tony?
Really good, thanks. Yeah. I loved your book, and it resonated with me so much.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's exactly why I wrote it. When you write a book, you don't know if it's going to resonate, and when you're writing about happiness, you got to write about the answers to the questions that you want, the questions that you have, and sometimes it hits, and sometimes it doesn't, because we're all different. But when it comes to trying to make a strategy for the rest of our lives, well, we're all looking for something. So I'm really, really happy it was useful to you.
Yeah, I mean, right at the start, you sort of talking about success addicts quite a bit, and it occurred to me, I'm definitely one of those. And it occurred to me that the sort of person who would buy that book in the first place is a success addict.
Yeah, I know, because it's funny. We start off with Mother Nature's formula for having a happy life, which is get as much of the early earthly success as possible: money, power, pleasure, fame, admiration, prestige. Instagram followers, whatever your thing is, and then you'll get happiness for free if you get those things. And it's false, and we all kind of know it.
Yeah.
But that message is ingrained in us by Mother Nature. Mother Nature says, pass on your genes and survive, and then you'll be happy. And that's not right. Happiness is up to us. It's a higher order good. And so the result is, once we're starting to figure that out, sometimes it's a little bit too late, and we're looking for a way off, an off ramp off that. kind of wheel that we're on.
Yeah. No, I was definitely sort of questioning, I my career choices were basically become a radio presenter, become a TV presenter. I really enjoyed the work and I did like it and I was good at it. But there's an element of, wanting it for the external validation, I guess.
For sure. This is one of the things that people who are in the public eye, one of the things that they frequently have in common is that they are very, very geared to social comparison and the opinions of other people. And if you set yourself up to understand yourself through the eyes of others, woe be unto you. It's a very human thing to do. There's a whole philosophical body of thinking about this. This is the two selves thinking that's very common in Zen Buddhism, but also in the West, as popularized by the philosopher William James. And it's the I self versus the me self. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking in the mirror, you're the looker, but you're the lookie as well. You're two people. You're the I self, I'm looking, I'm observing, and there's the observed, which is the me self. And people tend to pay too much attention to the me self. The world is full of mirrors, literal mirrors, but metaphorical mirrors as well. Your notifications on Instagram and Twitter, those are mirrors. And if you're in show business or you're in the media, man, that is just a hall of mirrors. And so you're just going to get hooked into the me self. There's a lot of research that shows that if your me self is too heavy compared to your I self, you'll be anxious, you'll be depressed, your emotions will be quite brittle, you'll be unable to be resilient to setbacks. You'll be kind of a facsimile of a real person, a cardboard cutout a little bit. It'll be like fake Tony, even to yourself.
Yeah. And I think, and then you said that the baseline for what you consider to be successful just keeps going up and up and up, if that's what's important to you.
Yeah, because humans are wired for progress. Humans are not wired for the status quo. We think that if we get to a certain level of success, then we can bank it and die happy, but that's complete nonsense. You find that really successful people throughout history have died very unhappy because the last couple of decades of their lives haven't continued to make progress. If you're an athlete or even a scientist, it's almost impossible to keep making progress. And if getting ahead more, if your philosophy of happiness is more, sooner or later you're not going to get more, and you're going to be sorely disappointed. You need a different way of seeing life, which is why I do the work that I do.
Yeah. And then sometimes I sort of think, Rupert Murdoch's in his 90s. He's still running a media empire. Is he less happy than the next 90-year-old?
No, I'm sure he's not. And I'm not saying that he's unhappy either. But what I'm saying is that your real happiness is not going to come from these worldly rewards, money, power, pleasure, fame. On the contrary, they're going to make you more and more frantic. If they go the wrong direction, it'll make you positively unhappy. If they don't, perhaps the case of Rupert Murdoch, at very least, you're going to have to keep chasing. When I work on people, when I'm talking to the most successful people, the strivers in life, I try to migrate them from the bad four, money, power, pleasure, fame, to the good four, which is faith, family, friends, and work that serves other people. And if you can migrate your ambitions from the worldly four to the heavenly four, as it were, then you can be as ambitious as you could possibly ever be and make progress for the rest of your life. And you have a good shot at being happier at 80 than you were at 40.
And that is why I would encourage people to read this book, especially if you're sort of in your 40s like me, and you do have those, because in the first part of the book, you address all those fears that I've got head on about decline
of course.
And death as well, but just getting older and not being as good. Which I guess a lot of success addicts have as their primary motivation in the first place.
Yeah. That's actually why I wrote the book the way that I did. And it was a risk, but the 2x4 across the chops gets your attention. And so the first part of the book is your decline has already started. So look out. I want everybody to say, I realize that the first 50 pages of the book are really depressing. The last 200 pages of the book are transcendent only because it's not bad. It's a good thing. You have to use what appeared to be your decline as an opportunity for a new kind of progress. And if you understand it, you can absolutely make that happen. I'm not even being a cockeyed optimist in this. The truth of the matter is that you need to understand the early decline so that you can get the later growth that really should be your due.
And that, it definitely resonated with me. Have you been surprised at how successful it's actually been? Because I've heard and seen your book mentioned by so many people in the public eye in news organizations since I started reading it.
Yeah, no, authors are always surprised. Don't let them fool you. It's the first time I saw somebody reading one of my books in an airport. I didn't know what to do. It's like an idiot. I'm not going to say, I just want to thank you for reading my book. I didn't know exactly how to act. I should have just kept my mouth shut and said, somebody's reading my book. But of course, I had to make a fool of myself. It's a funny thing. Now, the problem then, however, is that then you bank or you gauge the success of your next book on the sales of the book before it, because we're geared to progress. And, look, I'm a happiness scholar, meaning that I got to take my own advice and make sure that I don't do that with the next book.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, actually, because I wonder, I think on paper, I'm pretty good at a lot of the stuff you've talked about, and I'm definitely way better than I've ever been before and than I was 10 years ago.
Good.
I'm probably still a bit of a success addict, and I'm still probably really not staring death head on. And I'm still, so there's some in there still for me. What about you?
Well, of course. And part of that is that's actually how you're wired. You've probably been that way since you were a kid. The key thing is managing yourself, not changing yourself. One of the things that I talk an awful lot with my students at Harvard is about, they'll say, I got to get rid of my anxiety. I say, no, you don't. You need your anxiety. You need to manage your anxiety and use it as a source of strength. What you find is your anxiety brings you all sorts of different things. I was talking to a student in office hours yesterday, and I was saying, the reason that somebody wants to date you is because you're an interesting, hard-charging person. And that's related to your anxiety. You just don't want it to get above the dotted line where it goes from advantage to disadvantage. All of these things that we think of, these terrible debilities, no, they're actually our strengths. Our weaknesses are our strengths. We need to reimagine them, manage them, understand them, learn from them, and grow from them. So that's the key thing, Tony. You're a success addict, and you just have to make sure that you're not objectifying yourself, that you're a whole person, that you're in love with your wife, that you're taking care of your kids, that you have real friends. And then this little edge of success addiction can be channeled in the right way so that you're unbelievably ambitious to lift other people up, to do work that's really empowering. And sometimes it'll tip into, the great famous Tony, and then you got to rein it back. But, that's one of your charms, and it's always going to be one of your charms. Your weaknesses are not pure weaknesses. They're also your strengths.
Yeah. When you talked about that in the book, you also spoke about, you gave some quite extreme examples of turning weaknesses into strengths in terms of people suffering from quite extreme grief.
Right.
And I found even the concept of that. So was it Stephen Colbert
Yeah, Stephen Colbert lost his brothers and father in a plane crash when he was 12 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
He later said that it was the worst thing that ever happened to him, and something that he's grateful for today because he understood who he is as a person. And he's also a Christian man. And he believes that there are lessons that we can learn from the most dreadful of human experiences as part of our path to the transcendent. That's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing because none of us wants to, and certainly none of us is going to go looking for suffering. But the truth is, you don't have to look for suffering. It's going to find you. Yeah. The question is, when it finds you, do you push it away or do you learn from it and grow from it? Most people who have tragic occurrences in their life, which is to say everybody, most people actually wind up experiencing growth from it. It's called post-traumatic growth. And the post-traumatic growth actually outweighs the negatives that come in the long term from what they learned from the experiences. The way that you don't get that post-traumatic growth is by leaning against it, by trying to deny it, by saying it's pure bad, by not trying to learn from the particular experience, notwithstanding the fact that you didn't welcome it, you didn't want it, you wouldn't take it again, but it happened is the bottom line.
Yeah. And then a couple of the other sort of recommendations that you have for people as they start to age and they start to move into the second phase of life is staring their own mortality head on.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed. Is that something that you still do now, or do you feel that you've sort of ticked that box?
No, you never tick that box entirely. The interesting thing about mortality is this. I mean, a lot of people who are watching and listening to this. This is a really popular podcast. So a lot of people who are strivers are fans of yours. Now, and I know what they're saying, I'm not afraid of death. Come on, man. Who's this American guy saying you got to not be afraid of death? Yes, you are. But your death fear is probably not actually your heart stopping and brain functioning ceasing. Everybody's death fear is the threat to their concept of the self. But so, 20% of people are morbidly afraid of actually physically dying. And they have all sorts of different reasons. There are 8 reasons that they're afraid of it. There's scholarship. There's a whole research base around this. But most of the rest of us, we have a death fear. It's just, who's Tony? And if I threaten that, that's your death fear. For some people, it's becoming irrelevant. For some people, it's becoming forgotten. For a lot of my students, it's failure. A lot of my students are just morbidly afraid of failing because they never have before. They see themselves as success machines, as the one who wins, and anything that threatens that is their death fear. For me, I have my own death fear. My death fear is I'm not afraid of failing. I've failed. I'm not afraid of being forgotten. I know I will. It's as simple as, it's as obvious as the nose on my face, which is plenty obvious. What I'm afraid of is losing my mind. And the reason for that is because that happens in my family. It's hereditary. It tends to happen. Dementia happens early in my family. My mother was quite profoundly demented but when she was younger than I am today. And for me, man, this is the whole show, is what's going on between the ears. I mean, it's all ideas, it's concepts, it's sharing, writing, speaking, teaching. If that goes, that's death, or so it seems. And so what do I have to do? I got to lean into that. I have to say what happens is going to happen. And I'm still going to be a beloved husband and father and grandfather now, child of God, all the things that I actually believe, notwithstanding the fact that I'll lose the one thing that I identify with myself. And by the way, I should not be identifying myself with my intellect. That's self-objectification, which is success addiction.
Yeah. The self-objectification thing is good, actually, because it's not cool to objectify others. So why is it cool to objectify yourself?
Yeah, no, because it's like, how can I victimize myself? We do it all the time. We create trauma for ourselves. We work ourselves to death. We criticize ourselves mercilessly. It's like, you idiot, you say to yourself constantly things you would never say to another person, except another driver when they can't hear you. There's certain environments and we tend to be incredibly abusive, but we abuse ourselves constantly. And one of the worst ways that we do it is doing exactly what, I didn't know your dad, Tony, but I'll guess that if you made some remark that objectified a woman according to her looks, what's wrong with you? You don't talk about women that way. That's the wrong thing to do. And my dad too. But I objectify myself, not for my looks, obviously, but I objectify myself for what I actually can do to be successful. And that's a sin, actually. And
You're
it's
a very fine-looking man, Arthur. Don't worry. Interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that my podcast partners today are Bioptimizers and Magnesium Breakthrough. If you would like a shortcut to better sleep, more energy, and a calmer, more stable mood, and who wouldn't want that, then you need to make sure you're supplementing with magnesium daily, but not any magnesium, because about 75% of us are magnesium deficient, but there are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium. You need to get all of them if you want to experience its calming, health-enhancing effects. That is why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. And I took one probably about an hour ago. I take it twice a day sometimes, maybe once so far today, but often twice a day. It's the only organic, that's important, full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes 7 unique forms of magnesium. And, I've been partnering with Bioptimizers for a couple of years now, and they've had a couple of months off the podcast, and they are now back, and I'm very pleased about that. So you can go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology. And even when they weren't partnering with me, I was still taking Magnesium Breakthrough. Go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology, and you can get a discount if you use Zestology 10. And that works worldwide as well. If you're in the UK, you can go to the UK Bioptimizers site and use that same discount code, Zestology 10. So better sleep, more energy, stronger bones, healthier blood pressure. For me, it helps me sleep at night and relax, and definitely get less inflamed as well. Use the code Zestology 10 at the website magbreakthrough.com/zestology. Now back to the show. I suppose in terms of, it's interesting you talking about your students. Do you think this book and the concepts in this book are more needed than ever because of the way that the world is set up now? I've seen with people that we have who are just leaving university for the first time or on work experience, I've seen that there's an incredible intensity about them that I didn't have that at all. I don't think, not quite in the same way.
In the striver world, there's just way more competition that starts earlier. So one of the things that I see, when I was 18 years old and I was graduating from high school, nobody was taking classes so that the entrance exams, you'd be more competent on them. Nobody was thinking, most of my friends didn't go to college. And those who did certainly weren't thinking about going to the most competitive universities. But, what I find now, my children, when they were graduating from high school, and everybody was talking about how to get to Harvard or Oxford or these really famous universities. And that meant that they were kind of starting to feel competitive about it, and objectifying themselves and their achievements really, really early on. The world, now that it's become flatter and the means of communication become more democratized, we know what other people have and we want it, man, because we're wired for more. Mother Nature says, go get more. You're more likely to survive and more likely to pass on your genes. And that means more of everything. I want to be better looking. I want to have more Instagram followers. I want to be smarter. I want to have more prestige. I want to get to a better university. I want to make more money. And now I know what more really means because I'm comparing myself to this international sample of super achievers. It's total tyranny. Yeah. That's why we need this, this thinking about self-management more than ever before.
Yeah. It's sort of depressing, isn't it, when you think about the pressures that our kids have to go through?
Totally. And so one of the reasons that I've done this is because, I teach at a very competitive university, one of the most competitive universities in the world. And I saw misery all around me. I saw, my own kids, went to prep school and were getting ready to do things. And I wound up changing my whole parenting style on the basis of this research. So I wound up asking my kids to write a business plan for what they wanted with their lives. And I said, look, your startup is you. You're the entrepreneur of you. I'm VC. I'm venture capital for, your startup, but I need a really good business plan that's incredibly creative and individual. And I don't want some cookie cutter nonsense because I wouldn't fund that if I were an actual venture capitalist. And they did their own thing. One of them graduated and went to Spain, which she wanted to do. And one of them didn't go to college. He became a farmer for a couple of years. And then he joined the Marine Corps. He's a Special Forces Marine. And one of them went to a nice, competitive university and now is a school teacher. And these were all part of their business plans. But it was very helpful for me to say, what's your dream? Not what are people encouraging you to do?
Yeah. And then as we move into the second phase of life, one of the things you really encourage is for people to move away from identifying with this success, but more towards helping others, being a sort of like a village elder or a mentor. And I love that because then you can stay relevant and good at what you do all the way up to the moment that you die.
Yeah. This is the difference between what we call fluid and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is what you have an incredible abundance in your 20s and 30s, but it's in decline in your 40s. It makes you good at what you do, able to learn, working memory, indefatigable focus, and innovative capacity. And so you become a star litigator. You become, a big shot in your career. You can solve any problem. You're a cowboy or a ninja, basically, in what you do. But it declines. And it's not because you're getting stupid or that you're burning out. The reason is because that's the general tendency of the intellectual trajectory of your life. A second intelligence is coming in behind it, which is not your innovator brain, it's your instructor brain. It's your ability to recognize patterns on the basis of your wisdom and your accumulated knowledge. You know a lot and you know how to use it. You can explain things better. You can teach things better. The best teachers at my university are uniformly over 70. And the reason is because they have this incredibly high crystallized intelligence. And if they're still trying to do what they were good at 30, which is writing complicated mathematical treatises, it'll get the quality of their work will objectively go down and down and down and down and down. They need to start migrating from their innovator curve to their instructor curve. So from the star litigator to the managing partner, from the startup entrepreneur to the venture capitalist, from the researcher to the professor. That's the natural trajectory of things that plays to the strengths of the human brain. So you're in your 40s now. That means your fluid intelligence is declining and your crystallized intelligence is rising. In your 40s is when you need to walk from one curve onto the other, which means you need to craft a new business plan for Tony Inc. Yeah. Tony Limited.
Yeah. And then obviously I know that the time, having written books myself, I know the time between writing it and publishing it. It's probably a while now since you finished that manuscript. How do you rank your life, your habits and your lifestyle based on everything you said in the book now?
It's a work in progress. All the work that I do is because I want the answers to questions. It's me search more than research. And so the result is I make a plan for what I'm trying to figure out. I have a new book that's coming out in September, on September 12th, both in the UK and the United States. It's dropping on the same day, called Build the Life You Want, with Oprah Winfrey, and I wrote it together.
Wow.
And it's a series of questions that we cooked up at her house that we wanted the answers to, that we talked to people about it. And we wanted the answers for ourselves about building the life that we want, seeing the things that we've seen. And then we put pen to paper on the examples that she had learned over her really, really long and celebrated career, and the scholarship that I had studied, and all the research in neuroscience and social science. We put it together, and that's what it is. It's an opportunity for us to understand ourselves and share that learning with others.
What a buzz to work with her.
She's awesome. She's completely great. I mean, it's funny because when you meet people who are that notorious in a good way, that famous, you wonder, is it hype? It's not hype. Highly intelligent, super hardworking, super nice and warm. She's great.
Great. So did she reach out after this book?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she's a reader of my column in the Atlantic. So every Thursday morning in the Atlantic, it comes out at 6:00 Washington time, 11:00 in the morning London time, I have a column called How to Build a Life, which is about the science of happiness on a different one. And she's been reading that for years now, and then read From Strength to Strength. And then I did a podcast of hers, and we're like a house on fire. We're sort of kindred spirits coming at the same questions from different angles. And she's great. It's fun. It's like I got to say, Tony, it beats working.
Yeah. Well, I will look forward to reading that. There's two questions I ask everybody, which is, what is one book that you would recommend, which is not connected to your own books? And then what is one tip for energy and vitality? I'm very interested to know your answers to both.
Yeah. So, the books that I generally recommend are contemplative books that can help people on the path to wisdom. And there are different ways to do that. For people who really, really love fiction, for example, I recommend the Brothers Karamazov, or anything by Dostoevsky for that matter. And the Brothers Karamazov in particular is a contemplative book of applied psychology in a very spiritual vein. For people who are looking for sort of the pure oxygen, I recommend some of the books. If you want to start in the East, I would recommend Zen and the Art of Archery, or The Miracle of Mindfulness, one by a Zen Buddhist archery expert, and the second is by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist master. Or if you prefer the West, one of the books that really has changed my life the most is called The Way of a Pilgrim, which was written by an anonymous Russian Eastern Orthodox monk. And all he's doing is saying one single prayer throughout the book while walking barefoot through Russia and having adventures. And it's just the book itself is a mental pilgrimage. So that's the kind of book that I recommend. It's books that you read for 15 to 30 minutes a day, and you make progress on the basis of it. When we talk about energy and vitality, it's interesting because in my work, energy and vitality are related to quality of life, but not on the happiness side, rather on the unhappiness side. Strength and nutrition and fitness, they actually lower negative affect. They don't raise positive affect. And those things are occurring largely in separate hemispheres of the brain. They're different things. They're separable. And people who have high levels of unhappiness, that might be their problem in their well-being calculus. Those are the people that benefit the most from the idea of life and vitality that comes from particular habits. So I have a routine because I tend to have very high positive affect, but also very high negative affect. And so I don't need to get happier. I just need to get less unhappy from day to day. And so I have a very like clockwork routine that really helps me for that. I get up very early. I get up at 4:45 in the morning. I work out for an hour every day. So the gold standard is a lift for an hour a day, and I get 10,000 steps. And I'm 59 years old, so it's important to maintain that. Otherwise, you can. So I say a lot of my friends have more aches and pains than I do, who are my age. And then every day I go to mass. I'm a Catholic, and every day I go to mass at 6:50 in the morning. When I'm home in Boston, and I find ways to do it on the road as well. So by 7:30 in the morning, I'm starting to drink my coffee, of which I drink a lot. and I'm tanking up. My dopamine is optimized. So I get 3 solid hours of creative focus, but I've already gotten into the right spiritual space and gotten right into the right physical space to set me up for the rest of the day. And I recommend that people get protocols like that they start the day with every day.
Yeah. Wow. And there's a meditative aspect to the prayer, I guess, or the mass
Sure.
that gets your brain into the right place. And wow.
Yeah, it reminds me who I am and why I'm alive. I mean, it's interesting because the 2 big questions I ask people who have a meaning crisis. A lot of people that I meet, they don't know why they're unhappy. And the reason is because they don't have a sense of purpose and meaning in their life. And I can find out with just 2 short questions if you have a meaning crisis in your life. Question number 1 is, why are you alive? Question number 2 is, for what are you willing to die? And there's not right answers. But you have to have answers to that.
Yeah.
And so for me, my faith practice as a Christian is critical for answering those 2 questions. And so I'm reinforcing meaning every single day. I start off by moving my body, which is evidence to me that I'm actually alive. And then in the next half hour, I get to understand why I'm alive. So in other words, proof that I'm alive, and then the reason that I'm alive, and then I'm willing to actually act like a person who's fully alive for the rest of the day.
Yeah, great. And presumably you're in bed about 8 o'clock in the evening as well.
Well, I get up at 4:45, so I don't quite that early, but I try to get to bed by 9:30 at night. And my wife is Spanish, so that's been a 32-year battle.
Oh wow, yeah, she's going out for dinner.
Yeah, she's like, I'm getting kind of hungry. It's like, sweetheart, it's 9:15. It's just, yeah, I know it's kind of early, but still.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much for the book. It's a couple of months since I read it, so it's great to have my memory refreshed and be inspired by it again. And
thank you, Tony.
We'll put links in the show notes, but also look out for the new one as well. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that too, and I hope that it's very useful. It's coming out in the UK with Ebury, which is an imprint of Penguin, and I think it'll be useful to a lot of people, and I hope people enjoy it as well. Thank you for your show and for what you're doing for people, lifting people up and giving people energy and hope, and it's a beautiful thing that you're doing for people all around the world.
Oh well, and you, Arthur, thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
Thank you to Arthur, and thank you for listening as well. I hope that was a very inspiring, enjoyable interview, and I definitely recommend the book, and I'm going to be buying Arthur's next book as well. Before we go, my podcast partners today are Well Easy, the online store where you can get 20% off just about everything. You get wholesale prices, sometimes it's more than 20% as well, and you get free gifts if you go to welleasy.co.uk and use the code Zestology10 for £10 off your first order. I love Well Easy. I use it all the time. We get about 1 order a week. It started off being just a few little bits and a few nice little treats, and now we do as much as our shopping as we can there because it's just cheaper. And because everything's so expensive, we save loads of money. So as I said on a previous podcast, we get loo rolls on there and kitchen roll and cloths and toilet cleaner, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Go to welleasy.co.uk and see how much you can save. It is so satisfying in this age of high costs. Use the code Zestology10 for 10% off. Any questions, just ask me. Also, my podcast partners today are Magnesium Breakthrough and the whole Bioptimizers range. They have a brilliant range of sleep, health, well-being, gut health, nootropics, and all the rest. If you go to bioptimizers.com and bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10, you'll get 10% off all their products, including their best-selling Magnesium Breakthrough product. And for more details on that specific product, you can go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. Use the code Zestology10 and you're welcome. See you next time.